Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to some more of Choice of Rebels Uprising. We are reading through this Choose Your Own Adventure story. We have come to some excitement, I suppose. We'll see how it goes. So let's get back into it. We just had met this girl who apparently said something, and now there's some folks coming after her. So let's get into it. Strong words, Hetton Haltan said pensively. You going to talk so strong to their faces, Breden? Because they've seen us. His finger indicated two overseers striding up the field, willow switches in hand and scowls clear from 20 yards off. They'll hear stronger words than what I've said to you. Any of you willing to stand alongside me? Breden's blazing eyes were even more challenging than her voice. I'd like to step to her side. Maybe. I know I hate the overseers. Excuse me. That was my alarm to wake me up in the morning. I know that I would like to step to her side. I know I also hate the overseers. So let's see. Maybe we'll get to fight them. Gillian and the rest muttered in disapproval, but not surprise. You had a reputation for actions and questions that risked angering the overseers, begging the willow, people called it, and baiting the harrower, but so far you'd lost more skin and blood to your father's beatings than to your master's. When it became clear that no other Caryatau helot was going to join you, Breden grinned broadly. Right, 2 should be enough to see them off. She set off down the field with you at her left hand. The lead overseer's lips peeled back from his teeth as he watched you and Breden approach. His savage squint spoke of a hangover, but his whip hand was steady. You're not one of ours, girl. Tell me your name, and why I shouldn't take your lazy hide for coming down here and raising Zhao on a plow day. He jabbed a finger in your direction. Yours, too, for being a dirty little shirk. Willow branches, Breden replied coolly. Her tone ignited an unfamiliar thrill in you. You'd never heard anyone address an overseer with such open contempt before. You want to take someone's hide, man. You use threshing flails, like they just did on Olin Stonehewer. That's how you skin a helot right down to the angel-forsaken bone. The foreman loomed over the helot, raising his whip switch in an abrupt but unfulfilled threat. What are you jawing about, you insolent turd? Olin Stonehewer was beaten to death in front of his children on Angel Day, Breden said, voice pitched to carry out to the orchards. The traitor came to collect his girls at the end of the ceremony, and Big Olin hadn't known. No idea that the Pelamatau had sold them to a new house out east. He started begging to keep them or be sent with them, and his pleas were so wretched they upset Curia, Pelamatau's little daughter. Now you just watch your tongue, girl, the other overseer barked, glancing at the 50-odd helots around him. Poor child wouldn't stop sobbing, started pleading with her lady mother and making a great scene. In the end, she worked herself up so hard she fell frothing on the floor. Breden's lips vanished briefly into a thin, dark line. So Olin and his daughters were dragged out back, and he was beaten with threshing flails until those who loved him most couldn't tell him from butcher's wares. A whisper swept the field as every remaining Caryatau helot heard and reacted to Breden's news. Your own face showed no emotion. But I felt the tears sparking behind my eyes. Big Olin had been the most amiable and gentle of men, and his eldest daughter was barely 11. Because I felt none, the death was uglier than most, but I'd seen too many to be moved. But behind it, my hatred blazed up, fresh-fueled. I don't like these people. My hatred's going to blaze up, fresh-fueled. Breden stared down at the silent overseers for a few moments more, then concluded, his wake's tomorrow. I was sent to pass on the word. Tomorrow, the beefy man began to laugh, then cut it off in mid-gust. His unease sounded too clear even to him. He glowered back at the stream, where the remaining overseers were scrambling to their feet and grabbing their sticks. Tomorrow, every worthless sod in this field will be steering a plow to make up for all this lazing about, and you'll be too, or your master will know the reason. Aren't you to Pelamatau, then, or does some other house own you? Again, Breden simply ignored the demand for a name. Tomorrow afternoon, every helot in this field will be behind a plow. Tomorrow morning, every helot in this district will be sending off Olin Stonehewer. It is what it is. Seeing the fury boiling in the foreman's eyes, you spoke up. Only way to forget a bad death is to have a good wake. As when you gave us a day to mourn, Elder Jorce, we'll make up the plowing as late as we must. No one will know. What should we do? Let's say we'll make up the plowing as late as we must. No, because it's not going to swiving happen, the foreman snarled back at you, raising his long willow whip. Who by Zow do you think you are, trying to tell us how things will go on our patch? You'd taken enough beatings not to flinch or turn away when the switch lashed down. We know our duty, to Olin Stonehewer as well as to our masters. We'll make sure we meet both tomorrow. Angels, too dull to learn from a whipping, are you? The big man's voice was just as angry, but held a slight tremor that hadn't been there before. You truly think we'll give you a free half-day to run off, drink yourselves blind, and talk sedition? Breden shook her head sharply. No time for any of that, Overseer. There's a lot of mourning to be done and only a few hours to do it in. Well, we'll just see what the glorious Caryatau have to say about that. Their helots asking to leave to run off and mourn on a plow day. The Alasters won't find that too damn funny either. The foreman laughed a bit shrilly and stalked back towards the stream. When he met the overseers halfway, he unleashed a stream of oaths that went after them with his switch. Next time you see 'em starting to argue, you get off your blasted arses double quick. You heard, in between yelps and curses. They'll never tell no Caryatau. I don't care. That's that word. I hate the way I'm saying it, but I don't know any other way to say it. Caryatau? Caryatau? I don't know. Head and Hold Hand observed equably as you and Breden rejoined the group. Let alone no Alistair. They want the masters involved in this even less than we do. Everyone had been braced for an old "I told you so," but there was no trace of smugness in Breden's face or voice, just the same assurance and intensity that had seen off the foreman. You can expect a ready switch when you get back for the plowing. Don't expect we'll notice the difference, Gillian said gruffly. So where's Olin's wake to be? I'm told his people have a burying place up the river a ways, close to Callow's Pool. The young helot sounded suddenly uncertain. Callow's Pool. Yes, we know it, you told her, wondering how recently she'd been sold here. You'd been up to the Pelamatau helot yard many times after harrowings to lay to rest what the machine left behind. Good, but a couple of us will need to stand watch on the river road. Tell the nobles some story to send them over the bridge. Would you join me? She paused, clearly waiting for your name. What should my name be? Starn? Callan? Jind? Or choose a different name? Choose a different name, huh? Our name is going to be Callan. That sounds like a cool name. I think there's a guy on maybe NCIS Los Angeles. And while the nobles will call you Caryatau, as long as you're owned by the Aristarch's estate, your family name among helots is Oakfell. Sounds cool. I'm Callan Oakfell, you told Breden. Her flash of a smile hinted at recognition. To your surprise, you'd certainly never heard of her before that day. And yes, I'll serve watch tomorrow. You knew your father would be relieved to hear it. He tried to keep you from anything that might encourage your seditious tendencies, and funerals often got altogether too bitter and honest for his liking. But it had been a while since you took your turn keeping watch during a helot memorial or celebration, and you were thoroughly intrigued by Breden's boldness. Thus it happened that the following morning you met her in the river groves above the bridge crossroad. You greeted Breden, stood in an awkward silence for a few moments, and finally said, "Seemed like you heard my name before. Was I wrong?" Breden grinned. The Pelamatau helot said that of all the Caryatau, Pelamatu and Caryatau, well, maybe it should be two. Caryatau gang, you were the least easily cowed, the most likely to talk back to the overseers, if it came to that, and so it proved. You found your mouth curving into a grin as well. You're Pelamatu, then? We'll do two instead of Tau. No, thank angels. Breden shook her head vehemently. The de Rose are gentler on us by far, but we live close enough. She broke off. Riders coming. Remember, the road's flooded upstream. She stepped into the road, waving her arms. As the 4 horses thundered to a halt around you, you felt your throat tighten. Their colored capes... Kerms? Colored capes identified the riders even before you saw their faces. Kalia and Hector Cariatu. They're 2 oldest children of your master's household, along with a couple of retainers carrying caged falcons. Ooh. I let Breden do the talking. Nothing good happens to Helots who draw the young master's attention. I spoke up, not wanting to Breden. I glanced at Breden and put a finger to my lips. The less of us said, the better. The less either of us said, the better. I'll let her do the talking. Of all the... Did you want us to ride you down? Kalia gasped, fingers clenched around her riding whip. You could see the pulse in her throat hammering as hard as your own. No, Curioi. Curioi? To warn you. Breden's reply was quick and disarmingly cordial, the tone of someone reasoning with a friend. She nodded up the road rather than bowing. The road is flooded a mile up. They say it's dangerous even for horses. If you're riding east, best to turn off here for the bridge. Curious, Hector's eyebrows shot up at the startling lack of deference in Breden's voice. Should we thank you or whip you? You got some cheek for a field hand. What's your name, girl? Breden DeRose. Aristarchos, said the young helot. Her deep genuflection then was impeccably humble, and took her below easy reach. You dropped to an inch above the dust yourself, hoping to avoid any questions. So you know who we are, Kalia sniffed, lowering the crop. Is that why you threw yourself in front of our horses? The canon is very clear that we have the duty of self-sacrifice, Curia. There was a smile in Breden's voice, and the merest hint of insolence. After a long pause, Hector barked out an uncomfortable laugh. By all angels, girl, I don't imagine you escaped many thrashings from Mikhail de Rose, but we'll get more hawking in today thanks to your warning. My honest thanks. He wheeled his horse around and made for the bridge. Kalia kept hard eyes on you both for a moment longer, but then followed her brother, retainers in tow. A lot of reading, but I guess it is pretty much a book. They talk to aristos like that where you're from? They talk to aristos like that where you come from? You asked incredulously as you rose from your knees. Breden straightened up with you, brushing the dust from her hair. Like what? Like what? You laughed. Like you're half as good as they are, good enough to advise them, joke with them, just enough humility to keep them from riding their horses over you, and not a hair more. That's enough, isn't it? She said, almost breezy enough to be convincing. Look, I'd heard enough about those two to take a risk on their good humor. They like to be surprised, sometimes. And I wanted them to remember me, not you. Last thing you need is Kalia Cariatu's attention, from what I've heard. After, as if belonging to the DeRose will protect you, the Cariatu treat every Hela in the outer rim as their birthright. You couldn't help recalling Dan, the first of your young friends to catch Kalia's eye after she came of age. The overseers had whipped Dan the first time he vanished for a day, then had begun studiously to ignore his absences, avoiding him with both their eyes and their switches. Despite my father's dire warnings, I hadn't abandoned Dan, even as he lost most of his friends to fear of resentment. I stayed as far from Dan as I could, not wanting to be caught up in whatever trouble followed. I had no desire to stay friends with the noble's plaything. I'm gonna stick by Dan. Not his fault. Dan was grateful, vowing to you that he had never tried nor wanted to attract the curious notice. In the last weeks you had heard the dread thickening his voice, the certainty that the young noblewoman was tiring of him, that soon one of his disappearances would be permanent. It had ended at a harrowing where Dan's name was the first called. All you had been able to feel was a terrible gratitude that yours didn't follow. From that point, the pattern had recurred too often to be coincidence, and not just with Cariatu Helots. Breden spoke softly but vehemently. Yes, they're free enough to break canon when it suits. She looked down the bridge road. where the haze of their passage was clearing, as if their lives and their whole damn bloodthirsty hegemony didn't rest on us ignoring their example. That's right. That's right. The nobles not considering that there's a ton more helots that could take them out. So let's keep on moving. Your heart quickened at once and your voice sounded breathless in your own ears. Danos, Breden, and they say my words are baiting the harrower. How have you talked this free and lived this long? All our roads end at a harrower, Callan. What price should I pay just to put that off by a few more years? The slim young helot's eyes shone as they returned to yours. And I know who to trust. I can recognize the anger in others. You burn plainly enough for anyone with eyes to see. Not compared to you, you mumbled, dizzy with a blend of fear and longing. All your little rebellions against the overseers seemed like a mere game. Breden's candor hinted at a new, intoxicating possibilities. Don't know how you could be so sure. So I'm wrong. Breden's sudden expression of dismay was belied by her decidedly impish brows. You don't hate the thaumatarchy, then? The laugh that burst out of you felt like the first surge from a breached dam. I loathe it. Good, but not good enough, Breden passed on, grave and eager. What do you hate most? Bleeding angels, where to start? Ever since you watched the Hieros Zebed have his gentler predecessor beaten and banished, you've been learning to despise the Karagon hegemony. Then it crystallized in your mind, and you blurted it out to Breden. All the ways that helots are treated as less than human, above all the harvest of their blood and the harrowing, the thaumatarch's lack of ruthlessness when it comes to punishing his own corrupt and decadent officials, the superstitious nonsense the ecclesias teach to justify the evils of the hegemony, the corruption of the true faith of Xanos by the Karagon priesthood, the subjugation of Shayard, my homeland, and its forced assimilation into a foreign empire, the way the hegemony reinforces the ethnic divides between its subject peoples and keeps us cut off from the wisdom and wealth of outside nations. I honestly think it's hard to hate anything more than that first one. So we'll go with all the ways that the helots are treated as less than human, above all the harvest of their blood and the harrowing. Breden nodded, but her voice was surprisingly dismissive. You ever know a helot who didn't? Tell me something that actually tells me something, Oakville. Fine. Sitting aside the obvious, what you hate about the hegemony is the hegemony's terrible brutality to non-helots, for example, the torture and assassination of nobles by cryptist spies, the thaumatarch's laugh of ruthlessness, the superstitious nonsense. Why don't we do the corruption? I don't know. Let's do the subjugation of my homeland. We don't want to be here. A Shayard man proud and true, Breden quoted a much beloved folk song. The Karagons brought all our troubles with them. You couldn't keep the heat out of your voice. They turned our people into ecclesiasts and alistors and taught our nobles to treat helots as nothing but meat. Until Shayard is ruled by Shayardines, we'll never see justice. Breden nodded slowly. Well and good. What else? God, you plunge straight on to another thing you find nearly as appalling. The way the hegemony's defensive isolationism keeps its subjects cut off from the wisdom and wealth of neighboring kingdoms. Ooh, I don't like that. That's not good. If that's true, that's good. Okay. You feel strongly about what exactly? Breden looked puzzled. You ever get hungry to see what's over the next hill, Breden, and the one after that, and the one after that? Every step would take you somewhere folk saw things a bit different until you came to somewhere they barely thought the same way at all. A new world. Unlike so many of your fellow helots, her grin held no hint of scorn. Well, can't say it was because I had any hunger for it, Callan, but I saw a damn lot of hills when I was sold from the southern coast up to the outer rim, and folk were different, no question. How much more in another county, or outside the hegemony, to meet the abhumans, or even the Halasarks? The impossible thought elates you, as always. You let it hang half-formed in your imagination. I said as much near and Alistair when I was small. She almost had my father flogged. Told him to make sure that his son understood that there's nothing worth seeing in the other provinces, let alone across a border ward. Barbarians, all of them, who'd be good for nothing but Zhao if it weren't for the hegemony. Breden nods in sympathy. We've all heard that often enough. Keep to your own folk. Don't look for anything good from a near or a wind. Just look to Karagon, the glory of the world, the angelic Omphalos. You spit on the ground. It's also we can't join up against them, so we can't imagine anything but what we see on the nearest hill. It made us weak and poor, Breden, so much poorer than we have to be. A slow smile spread across Breden's face. So how is it then? Breaking the silence, sharing the rage. Truly? You could barely begin to decipher all the shivers going through you. I've put my life in your grasp, and you're no kin to me or anyone I know. How do you think I feel? Angry? Alive? She reached out to clasp your hand, smile fading and frightened. Free and free. For folk like us, those will always go together. I'm not going to jump into kissing just yet. We want to see her again. We want to keep talking. Don't want to kiss her just yet. Okay. Now that you said the unthinkable, it was extraordinarily hard to stop. You fought to quell the flood of words rising in your throat. Better to take time to think it through before it all came spilling out. Breden, our watch here is only going to last a morning. Where and how can we meet to talk more of this? The overseers will be on us every moment of the next few days. There's a place. She thought for a moment, then nodded. Since Curious McCall lost the hands to keep the dikes in repair, the whole Duro's north edge has sunk into marsh. No one passes that way. Meet me in the stand of alder between the river pond and the outbuildings a week from today at the 9th hour. I'll be there, you vowed. Okay, so we read that. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you have made it this far. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed the choices that I've been making. Please be sure to comment how you want me to play maybe in the future. Maybe you want me to go straight for the affection with old Breden, or maybe you want me to keep it slow and really woo her. Doesn't matter. But please just like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. I love you very much.